Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 11 of an exciting new series. What if Genius Deku challenged the world without a quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by JayDeeKay on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. The sound of cameras flashing and a crowd of people muttering deafened the outside air. However, behind the massive curtain, Madam President did a final check of her appearance, making sure she looked impeccable for the address. Around her, her assistants are scrambling around, busily, buzzing through several checks with sound, security, and the reporters. Eventually, one of her subordinates approaches her, nervously, with several cue cards in his hands. Madam President? She turns to the young man, her steely eyes causing the man to flinch. They're ready for you, ma'am. She keeps her gaze locked with the young man, who seems to be looking everywhere but her. However, she eventually takes the cards from his hand, looking through them and nodding slightly. She sees her security team forming a lane for her to approach the stage and turns back to the young man. What sort of questions will I be expecting? The man stiffens and straightens his posture to match a ramrod. The reporters are vetted, and from news sources we can trust. There shouldn't be anyone asking any unwanted questions. Good, she nods. Then let us begin. She looks up to the row of men in suits, forming a path for her into the bright lights of the stage. One step at a time, she strides with confidence onto the stage and is met with a maelstrom of camera flashes, paired with a cacophony of questions, all drowning each other out. Her stride brought her to the stage, her grip finding itself on either side of the podium. In front of her, various labeled microphones from several news stations looked back at her. She leaned forward and began to address the crowd. This public address comes in the wake of several tragic events. The president pauses, letting the public hang on to her words. I intend to address each point to the best of my ability, but I ask that you voice your questions only when called upon. She gestures to the crowd, to an older man with a notepad who stands from his position. Ma'am, the unprecedented events of the sports festival are still fresh in everyone's mind, specifically of the finale. Do you have any statements regarding those events? An expected question, one that she had prepared for ahead of time. The incident regarding the events of the UA Sports Festival was an unfortunate tragedy. She heard cameras shuddering, but continued on. Our condolences go out to those affected by the match, both as participants and as viewers. The reporter sits down, and then the president points out a young woman wearing a long overcoat. The woman stands and begins writing in a notepad. There have been several questions regarding the actions of Katsuki Bakugo, namely, the maliciousness of his actions. Can you enlighten the people on that front? The president shakes her head. That matter is still being investigated. However, so far we have no reason to believe that Katsuki Bakugo acted with actual malice. Once again, a pause, before continuing. Bakugo has a powerful, but volatile quirk. It is far more likely that the young man simply lost control of his quirk. The woman, instead of sitting, pressed the question, accident or not, he still put a student in a critical condition. Surely there will be severe punishment administered to the boy. She narrows her eyes at the reporter slightly, but keeps her features schooled. She did not appreciate the pressing, but was prepared for it regardless. I should not have to remind you that Katsuki Bakugo is not just a student at UA, but was the student who received the highest score on the entrance exam of his year. The president flipped through a card, stealthily. So far in our investigation, we have found nothing but positive commendations of Bakugo and his potential as a hero. What happened a few days ago was likely an unfortunate accident, one that, in my opinion, should not lead to the dissolution of such a promising young hero. Besides, Madam President continues, UA is a private institution, a separate entity. We have no say over how they choose to reprimand their students. And while we are aiding in the investigation, they are the primary party in said investigation. Her gaze hardens on the young reporter. Do you have any more questions? The reporter flinches and returns to her seat, much to the president's delight. She moves to point out the next reporter. but finds her efforts interrupted. "You say that, ma'am?" A new reporter stands, one who had not been called on beforehand. But was it not a commission agent acting as referee during the finale of the festivals? The president feels a spike of anger quake in her chest, but keeps her features neutral. That was not an approved question. She flips her eyes back to the corner of the stage, where her assistant, now former assistant, was trembling. However, perhaps she could use this. The Hero Commission was called upon to fill in for the referee during the finale. That is true. The president concedes this, but her gaze turns more to steel. But that does not equate to us commingling in the internal policy of UA. Perhaps, the reporter parries, but it does suggest that, perhaps, UA and the Hero Commission are not as separate as you claim. I worry that, however unintentional, there may be a conflict of interest involved there. She was now glaring at the reporter, who seemed to be grinning back, smugly. She could hear other reporters muttering about this. She could feel the concern of her team behind the curtain, chattering among themselves. But her mind was calm. This was a bump in the road, a misplay for sure. But not one she couldn't recover from. She simply needed to change direction. "I am not here to entertain conspiracy theories," she addresses, firmly, to the reporter, who seems to try to interrupt her. But she presses on. "I am here to reassure the public of the truth. If you wish to know more about the events of the sports festival, it would be best to direct those questions to the school themselves. The Hero Public Safety Commission, however, has far more pressing matters." The reporters lean in, gripping her every word. Yesterday, at 10:08 p.m., tragedy unfolded in the Hosa Prefecture. Ingenium, civilian name, Tensei Ida, was murdered. The camera flashes grow, and the president leans forward. This information was kept private for the sake of his family, but due to the nature of the crime, it seems prevalent to address the pattern that was presented to us. There was an uproar in the crowd, who stood, trying to glean more information about the murder, all seemingly forgotten about the sports festival. If the president wasn't still on stage, she might have smiled at how easily she could herd the sheep. A young, promising hero was taken from us, his future robbed by a madman. A villain, known only as the hero killer, she declared, with the reporters standing from their seats, firing questions at her. And the commission is dedicated to finding this evil man and bringing him to justice. For the safety of both our heroes and the public at large. The crowd continued to rapid-fire questions, but at her insistence, they began to sit down again. She turned and saw that the reporter who had been derailing this conference was gone, likely removed by security during the fuss. At least some of her subordinates could actually do their job. The brightly lit room scorched his retinas, yet Ken could only sit in the chair, looking down at the surface of the cheap, scuffed table that lay in front of him. He lifts his head, taking in the unmarked, dull gray walls surrounding him, only being interrupted by a door and a large mirrored pane. A position, unfortunately, that Ken was quite familiar with. He was just more used to being on the other side of the glass. He sighed to himself, staring up at the single light bulb swinging in an invisible breeze above him. The motion of the bulb made the shadows of the table, and his own dark reflection, dance around in a drunken, macabre waltz. He leaned back in his chair, thinking back to the events of the past day. As soon as the school day had ended, and he was walking to his car, he noticed figures hidden in the trees and alleys. When he got to the parking lot, Ectoplasm, Nizu, and Power Loader were waiting for him. In the end, the ambush mattered not. He was going to go to the police station after school that day. Anyway, all they had really changed was he was being interrogated at UA, not the police. Perhaps this was actually better, less chance of the commission interfering. A knock on the door rang out before a figure entered the room. Nizu took a seat at the table holding a file and flipping through some pages. Ken leaned forward, straightening his shoulders and flicking his eyes between the smiling rodent and the unseen glare of the support course teacher to their side. "So," Nizu begins, "I'm sure you know why we are holding you here." Ken does not speak, but nods, gauging the reaction of Nizu. As usual, the rodent seems unaffected, patiently waiting. However, he knows that facade hides one of the most creatively sadistic minds he had ever known. "You know," Nizu begins, "I remember seeing your resume when we hired you. UA alumni. Excellent grades, a decade of service without a single complaint or failure. Nisa squeaks out a small giggle. Honestly, the only thing this is missing is a gold star in the corner. But I am sure that you know, Nisa continues, I did not hire you for your resume. I hired you because I believed that you were somebody that I could trust with the next generation of heroes. Nisa closes his eyes. It appears that I was wrong. I didn't think it would go this far. Ken admitted, I thought that if his suit was destroyed, Midoriya would have simply quit. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Oh, so that excuses your actions? Nizu quirks his eyebrow at that, causing Ken to flinch. Because you miscalculated and didn't expect this to happen, that excuses what you did? Nizu's voice was even, but Ken knew how to see the barely perceptible anger boiling just under the surface. Yet, he did not respond in any meaningful way, leading to Nisa flipping through pages of the file. Continuing on, Nisa states, your file is quite impressive even before high school. I actually never took a look at it myself until recently. Youth leadership scholarships, Good Samaritan awards. You even earned a commendation from your middle school for your intellect and drive to be a hero. With each statement, Ken only deflated more, unable to muster the ability to pretend to be proud of those lies. It truly is a shame that none of it is real. Nizu speaks with finality, and Ken can almost hear the other shoe drop. Is it Blood King Ken? Ken froze at Nizu's words, his blood running cold. He looks up and sees Nizu, staring back at him, the rodent's beady eyes giving nothing away. His jaw opened, but simply flapped loosely, like a flag in the wind. He felt his veins fill with ice, his mind finally processing the truth. It was all over. Eventually, he found his voice. How? I must say, Nizu interrupted, lazily flipping pages, the commission did an excellent job of hiding your past. Any trace of your past was almost completely wiped clean. Nizu sighed. I honestly cannot blame my predecessors for failing to see that your records were a complete farce. The astroturfing done here was impeccable. But, Nizu jeers, every armor has its cracks, and when properly prodded, the armor fails. Nizu lifted his gaze. I am sure you know that well, given your action against Midoriya. The rodent flipped the file down on the table, showing Ken two different records, side by side. On the left, the idealized life, a picture of a young, determined Ken staring at the camera with seriousness. The other side is sorrowful reality, a disownment deed from his parents, a stack of police files that could have only been his record, and a young Ken staring at the camera with a sneer, tattoos clear on his arms and the base of his neck. His eyes held malice, but hidden deep within them, a pain, a desire to be free of his cruel truth. Ken could not bear to look at the files, either of them, for more than a moment. So instead, he stared down at his lap. Nizu, however, walked across the short table, grabbed Ken's chin, and forced him to look up at him, staring down at the defeated man. Nizu looked down at him with disdain, an all-too-familiar sight, and Ken felt a wave of shame consume him. Do refrain from wallowing, Ken, Nizu orders. It is quite unbecoming. His hand left Ken's chin, but Ken's eyes stayed locked firmly on the rat, who turned around and sat back in his chair. Instead of blubbering in defeatist machinations, I want you to explain the truth to me. Perhaps speaking in candor for once in your life will help you find your conscience. Ken took a moment to gulp in a breath, slowly calming himself to speak. Eventually, he finds his rhythm and opens his mouth. As soon as my quirk came in, everything in my life started going wrong. My parents began to distance themselves from me. The teachers and students at school were afraid of me. But things got worse when I used my quirk at school. Ken's eyes glazed over, lost in memory. I barely remember what started it, but another boy was insulting me, and I just wanted him to stop. So, I cut my arm open and grabbed him with my blood, pinning him to the ground. The hulking man let out a shuddering breath. The teachers took me inside and called my parents, and when my parents arrived, they told me that I was a monster and that they knew this would happen. Ken barked out a bitter chuckle. Before I even had a chance to argue, they had come to a corner and shoved me out of the car, driving away. I never did see them again. I ended up in some foster homes, but every time it was the same. They took me in, found out about my quirk, and it was right back out on the streets for me. Ken paused, and Nizu leaned in, invested in the story. They would make up excuses saying I was violent and cruel, that I stole things and attacked them, anything to get me out the door. Ken paused before quoting the phrase he had internalized all those years ago. The boy with the creepy blood quirk. Eventually, I was deemed a lost cause, and the orphanage kicked me out after a few years. Ken's mind went back to the days of sleeping in boxes and ducking into alleys, desperately hunting for food. I was bitter and scared, Ken admitted, a kid on the streets, desperately trying to survive. It was only a matter of time before I would mix in with the local criminals. Ken shifted, rolling up a sleeve and displaying the Yakuza tattoos decorating his arm. It would start off small, an odd job here and there. Pickpocketing someone, tripping someone else, I didn't care because I had found people who didn't think I was scary, who didn't think I was a monster. Things escalated. Ken continues. Of course they did. I went from pickpocketing to armed robbery. I knew it was wrong. But every time I would come back, and they would celebrate me, they would treat me like family. Ken sighed. They were even the ones to give me my last name. I hardly remember what my name was before then. Not that it matters anyways. How did you end up working for the commission? Nizu asks. I got caught, Ken sighs. A botched robbery, a bit too much looting, not enough running. I was 16, but I was also in charge of the job. So I stayed behind so that the rest of the gang could get away. Ken shakes his head. Instead of being brought to a prison, I was brought to the commission building and was interrogated by Madam President herself. Nizu's eyebrows rose in surprise at that revelation, but didn't interrupt. Ken continued. She told me that I had potential, that I could leave the Blood King behind and make something great of myself. Ken lowered his head. I wanted to be better than everybody thought I was. I wanted to be more than what I was born with, so of course, I accepted. Well, Nizu said, straightening his posture. Your first mistake was believing what she said. Ken moved to speak, but Nizu interrupted. Do not mistake. I believe that she did truly see potential in you. Just not the potential you were thinking of. Nizu leaned in, pushing Ken's file to him. She saw a young, naive boy who wanted, terribly, to prove the world wrong, and would do anything to do it. She saw a teenager who had never been given a chance to be great, and played you like a violin. She saw someone who was loyal to the point of self-sacrifice. Young and desperate, Nizu stood, hopping down from the chair. In other words, she saw the perfect attack dog, a pawn. Ken felt the truth behind Nizu's words stab him to his core, each deduction dismantling what he thought he was, and revealing to him exactly who he had become. He felt himself begin to shake, as his mind clouded with guilt, anger, and sorrow. So, Nizu approached Ken, tapping his leg. Here is what is going to happen. You're going to tell me everything you know about the Hero Commission, their inner workings, their agents, their procedures and operations. Ken turned his head, staring down at the diminutive chimera at his feet. Is this supposed to be an outreach? Are you trying to offer me a deal? Oh, Nizu squeaked out a chuckle. I assure you, Ken, that there is no deal. Nizu declared. Your actions led to a disaster, personally, publicly, and reputationally for UA and the Commission. Nizu turned, walking away from Ken. Sure, perhaps the Hero Commission can play it off. Perhaps if this gets out, they drop accountability and move on. But the reality is your life is over. Ken shuddered out a shaky breath, but nodded. He had accepted this was the outcome. What he had done was unforgivable, and he had nobody to blame but himself. No, Nizu stated, I am not offering you a deal. What I am offering you is a chance to do the right thing. I am giving you a chance, for the first time in your life, to decide what you do next. Not the society that rejected you, or the foster parents that slandered you, not the commission that used you. You. Nizu pulled out a small device, a small square with a microphone sticking out of it. Now, Nizu pushes the microphone to Ken. What are you going to do? Ken stares at the microphone like the barrel of a loaded gun. His heart crawled into his throat, as if willing itself to escape his body, and he felt his breathing grow labored. His mind immediately began weighing his options. He thought that if he stayed silent, that he may be able to salvage his relationship with the Commission. If he protected those that had given him everything, Surely he would be rewarded in time. But, in truth, he knew there was only one option that he could live with in the end. Slowly, Ken grabbed the microphone, hit the record button, and began to speak. Majima hurriedly walks down the hall, turning the corners that are starting to become dreadfully familiar. The walls change from their pristine white and bold red finishings to a much more muted cream color. Passing a few rooms, Majima turns another corner, seeing the door to the nurse's office at the end of the hall. He takes a breath and begins walking towards the room, but stops when he sees Recovery Girl open the door, closing it behind her and shrugging on a jacket. When she sees Majima down the hall, she lets out a sigh and slowly approaches the support course teacher. Majima moves as well, meeting her halfway. When Majima gets close, he opens his mouth to speak, but the healing heroine puts up a hand, stopping him. He's fine. She answers an unspoken question, and Majima closes his mouth. He's resting right now, which is good for him. Recovery Girl's eyes narrowed a bit, and Majima's shoulders hunched. I know, Majima slumps. I know he needs his rest, and it's good that he's sleeping now, but I'm worried. Recovery Girl sighs, and makes to reassure Power Loader, for the umpteenth time, that Midoriya is recovering, but he interrupts her all too familiar tirade. I'm not talking about his condition this time. Majima takes a deep breath. Don't you find it odd that nobody has come to pick him up? Or even check on him? The thought had crossed Recovery Girl's mind multiple times. She had called his home several times, left multiple messages, but had received no answer. Not even an email. The implication of that was bleak, to say the least. But Recovery Girl was far more focused on keeping Midoriya resting, if not for his physical well-being, then for his mental health. Perhaps his family is on vacation? Recovery Girl supplied, optimistically, but that only seemed to weigh on Majima more. Vacation? Yeah, sure, he chided sarcastically. I spent over 2 weeks combing the footage and dictation he had given me for the process he used for his arm. Majima lifted his hand, counting down his fingers. I witnessed him cause 4 small explosions, 3 critical failures, and burst into a tirade of curses that would make a hardened criminal blush. And do you know what I never saw? Recovery Girl's stomach dropped more, what little optimism left fading. She knew the answer. Not once did his parents or anyone ever check on him. Majima concludes, answering Recovery Girl's fears with bitter truth. Not even a quick peek, or a shout for him to quiet down. So, no, Majima continues, I'm not worried about his recovery while he's here. Majima took a deep breath. I'm worried about what happens after when he leaves and goes back to that house. Majima leaned against the hallway, the stress of the situation clearly getting to him. Recovery Girl, eventually, took up a position across from Majima, leaning against the other wall and facing the support teacher. A drawn-out silence fell over the two, neither willing to break the tranquility of the moment. Majima, for the sake of trying to quell the ache in his temples, and Recovery Girl, as she tried to find the right words for the situation. Neither would have the opportunity, however, as they heard loud footsteps jogging down the hallway. Rounding the corner, they saw a flash of bright red hair, as Eijiro Kirishima appeared to them, panting lightly in exertion. Oh! Kirishima burst out. Am I too late? Sorry, I got lost on my way here. This school is a maze. Hello, dearie, Recovery Girl says with a tired smile. Did you get hurt in hero training? No, I mean yes, but not badly. Just some bruising. Kirishima sighs. I was wondering if the support course kid was still here. Mito something? You mean Midoriya? Majima instinctively gets defensive, rising from his leaning position on the wall. Why do you want to know? You and him have hardly interacted before. Kirishima sighs and slumps forward. I know that it's none of my business. But I just wanted to see if I could talk to him. Kirishima begins to rub the back of his head. Not for any particular reason. I just know that when I'm down, having someone to talk to can help me get my mind off of it. Kirishima lifts his gaze to meet Majima, his eyes open and kind. He went through something horrible, and I thought maybe I could help with that. Majima relaxes, regretting his suspicion of the boy. Still, he finds himself with some lingering questions. Forgive me if this comes off as rude, Kirishima. Majima opens, but you and Midoriya aren't exactly friends. Why are you so concerned about him? Kirishima looks up at the support course teacher with confusion clear on his face. What do you mean? Yeah, we don't really know each other, but that doesn't mean that I don't feel bad for what happened. Kirishima's confused expression only grew, though he seemed to grow somewhat shy. Isn't it only right to want to help people who are hurting? Majima was stunned briefly by the boy's question. He chided himself, berating his previous attitude of skepticism towards the boy, and moved to apologize. However, Recovery Girl interrupted the teacher. That is very kind of you, dearie. Recovery Girl lays a hand on Kirishima's shoulder. But right now, Midoriya is not taking many visitors. He needs to focus on resting, and as I'm sure you can imagine, that can be hard with people asking you questions. Recovery Girl then points to her watch. Besides, visiting hours are over now. As is school hours. You had best get home before your family gets worried. Plus, you have internships in the morning, right? Oh, of course. Kirishima slaps his forehead. Sorry, I completely forgot about the time. I'll get out of your hair. Kirishima spins around to start jogging away, but is stopped when Recovery Girl calls out to him. When Midoriya is ready to receive visitors, you will be one of the first we tell? Okay. Kirishima smiles back, sharp teeth glinting. Thanks. I would really appreciate it. With a wave, Kirishima runs back down the hall, towards the entrance of the school. Once he gets far enough away, Recovery Girl sighs, leaning back against the wall once again. She looks up, pointedly, at Majima, who had the decency to act embarrassed. You really pressed that poor boy, didn't you? Recovery Girl did not seem mad, more disappointed. Not that Majima could blame her. I know, that was too far, Majima admitted. But really, can you blame me for being a bit distrusting? Given everything that has happened? Her features fall, and she lets out a breathy chuckle. Yes, I suppose you had reason to act the way you did. But you seem to have forgotten one of the golden rules of heroics, young man. Recovery Girl set her cane and began to adjust her coat, lining up the button. Sometimes, she continued, it can be hard to see the good in the world, especially when the bad is so easy to see. But that is why you need to remind yourself that for every bad person out there are 100 good people, all trying to do the right thing. She finished buttoning her coat, striding slowly down the hall. Majima is still watching her go. Never stop being a good person because of bad people. With that, she turns the corner, leaving Majima alone in the hall. Never stop being a good person, huh? He looks back at the door to the nurse's office, locked for the night. I wonder who she was talking to there. Hannah climbed the stairs of her apartment building, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Today was the first day of her school's career fair. All day, she had wandered the school listening to lecture after lecture from people, all talking about their careers and why they should be interested. In truth, she had found the entire spectacle quite boring. It wasn't that there weren't any exciting jobs. Far from it, several scientists had been explaining their research on Island. There were media members talking about the adventure of investigative journalism. Even the wild pussycats had shown up to give a talk about rescue hero work. No, the lectures weren't inherent. Why boring? Hannah just failed to see herself in any of those positions. With a sigh, she approached her family's apartment. Pulling out her key and turning the lock, she is greeted by the smell of baking salmon tickling her nostrils. Breathing in the smell, she entered the living room, seeing her mother in the kitchen, managing several pots, and the oven with practiced ease. Off in the corner, her father is busy on his computer, finishing off some work left over from the hours before. Oh, her mother chirps, "Good evening, dear. How was school?" Hannah plastered a smile to her face. It was fine, nothing special. I heard the career fair started this week. Her father called out, still busily typing away. Did you find any jobs that interest you? Hannah fought the urge to roll her eyes. There were some very interesting career paths, just none that caught my attention. Oh, her father replied. Well, that's not terribly surprising. You're still in middle school. You have plenty of time to figure out what you want to do with your life. Hannah sighed, her father's words striking a chord in her stomach. The rest of my life? There was something about deciding what she wanted to do for the rest of her life that just paralyzed Hannah. She was barely a teenager. How was she supposed to know what she was going to be happy doing until she dies? Not to mention, She found it hard to concentrate on her career path after the sports festival. It was like that moment was burned into her mind. The quirkless boy's face, the raw, red skin, and his. She was taken from her thoughts with a gentle hand on her shoulder. Looking up, she saw her mother, looking at her with concern. Her father had stopped his work and was looking at Hannah with confusion and some worry. "I am sorry," Hannah stated. "Were you saying something?" Her mother's brows furrowed. "I was trying to tell you to get washed up for dinner, but it seems you were thinking of something else. Is there something you wanted to talk about?" Hannah's immediate instinct was to deny it, but her tongue twisted and stopped her from speaking. She paused, but eventually began to speak her mind. "I've been thinking about the sports festival, the finale." Her parents' concern turned to understanding, and they both nodded. "Oh, sweetie," her father begins. "Why didn't you tell us?" Her mother nods. "Yes, you should have come to us earlier." The woman's brows furrow. Such a horrible accident. Accident? Hannah stares at her parents in confusion. Her parents matched her confusion. "Yes, accident." Her father said, "You must have not heard about the press conference." The Hero Commission president gave a statement about the situation. Hannah did not answer, processing that revelation as she went into the bathroom to wash up. Pulling out her phone, she opens the search browser and finds a video of the president speaking. She lets the video play, absorbing the words that the Hero Commission president states. The woman speaks with authority and finality, which Hannah knows should reassure her. But the more she thinks about the conference, the more confused she becomes. Accident? Hannah thinks back to the broadcast from the finale. The blonde-haired boy, Bakugo, pinning the other down, holding his hand open over the green-haired boy's face. That wasn't an accident. It couldn't have been. She washes her hands, staring into the mirror, as if her reflection could offer some form of answer. But then why would Madam President lie? Maybe there was something I didn't see. Maybe it really was just an accident. She finishes washing her hands, drying them on the plush towel next to her. "This doesn't make sense," she declares, nodding imperceptibly to herself and opening the door to the bathroom. "I'm missing information." "But what?" Looking back at the still image of the commission president, she whispers, "What am I missing?" Toshinori sighed from his chair, leaning back into the plush embrace of the furniture. The teacher's lounge was empty, allowing him to properly relax for a spell. Looking out the window, he saw the vast expanse of forest that marked U8's campus, with tall skyscrapers far in the distance, framed by a bright blue sky. He took a moment to take in the skyline, taking a deep breath and ignoring the warm cup of tea in front of him, slowly going cold. Still, despite his attempts, he finds that he is unable to relax. Years of spending nearly every waking moment leaping across city blocks and fighting villains had left him with a chronic inability to simply take a moment to himself. He finds his foot tapping, fingers anxiously checking his messages, morbidly hoping there was something new for him to do. But like the last several times he had checked, there were no new messages. He finds his fingers idly tapping, lightly fanning his toes within his oversized shoes. His eyes darted around the room, desperately trying to find something to catch their gaze. The features of the room remain unchanged. 3 coffee mugs in the sink, unwashed one cupboard drawer, slightly ajar, and the soft squealing of the mechanism of the refrigerator with a photograph framed next to it. His eyes focus on the picture, a staff photo from a few years ago, before he had taken this position. Getting up from the chair, he walks over to the photo, a frozen memory he was not privy to the making of. He sees his co-workers standing shoulder to shoulder, in various states of animation. Going from the left side, he sees Midnight smirking, winking at the cameraman. Next to her, President Mike pumps a fist into the air, mouth wide in a shout of excitement. His antithesis, Aizawa, stands bored with Yamada's arms slung around the tired teacher's shoulder. He almost seems more haggard and sleepless than now, though Toshinori does note that he is considerably less stubble. Hound Dog stands with his arms crossed, muzzle present on his face, but a toothed smile clear from within the mesh. Next to him, Cementos stands with his hands behind his back, not smiling, but otherwise politely participating. Between all of them, Nizu stands diminutively between the legs of Aizawa and Hound Dog, arms outstretched like a ringmaster presenting his circus. Even through the photo, he senses Nizu's deceptive cunning. But the stoat seems well-meaning even now. Towards the right side, Ectoplasm stands relaxed, his pointed prosthetic feet poised in a soft V. Wiccan standing rigid, saluting the cameraman like a soldier salutes their superior. Finally, at the end stands Maijima, looking like he wished to be anywhere but there at that moment. He can't help but note the feeling of disordered unity this photo emanates. The group in this photo are chaotic, but also in sync, playing off one another to bolster their strengths and cover their weaknesses. A staff of different but unified people, all working towards the same goal. Yet as of recently, he hasn't been able to feel that from his new co-workers anymore. His eyes flick back to the support teacher, and Tashinori finds his heart clenching at the man, reminded of their last interaction in the teacher's booth. Something about Power Loader's words had stung him in a way he couldn't properly understand. He knew that a lot of what the short man had said was spoken in anger, but they stuck with him all the same. He just didn't understand why. Sure, by consequence of his career, all might have become synonymous with the commission. He hadn't had a choice. The Hero Commission decides who gets a hero license, so of course he would cooperate with them early in his career. If he hadn't, then he would have never been able to do so much good. In order to do what has to be done, one must play the game. It wasn't his fault he wasn't there to write the rules. What else would I expect from the commission's biggest show pony? Tashinori closes his eyes, turning away from the photograph and to the window, looking down at the entrance of the school below. He tries to distract himself, focusing instead on the students currently heading out the front gate of the school. In pairs, he sees the first-year students chatting animatedly as they head out the door, Aizawa and Namiri following close behind. Ever since the revelation of Kan's involvement with the finale, Nizu had put Namiri in charge of Class 1 BS continued education, at least until they found a proper full-time replacement. From what little he could see from his perch above the crowd, she seemed to be taking her position very seriously, bringing a smile to Tashinori's face. Perhaps she should look into taking over the role permanently? His eyes catch on a shock of red, with Kirishima and Ishido exiting the school, talking with one another with clear excitement. He focuses on the red-haired boy and nods to himself. While he had wanted to talk with the boy before internship started, he had not had the chance given the chaos of the previous few days. So, instead he had opted to use the internships as an opportunity for a test of sorts. Pulling out his phone, he scrolls down through his contacts, hovering over the one he had in mind. His thumb freezes over the call button, heart hammering in his chest, before finally hitting the name and holding the phone up to his ear. A ring buzzes, then another, and a third begins before being abruptly stalled, followed by a voice. Well, a ragged, harsh voice rings out from the other end. The great All Might, making time to call an old teacher of his? Must be my birthday. The familiar sarcasm of his former mentor's speech helps to calm Tashinori's nerves a bit. Hello, Gran. He takes a breath. Unfortunately, this is not a pleasure call. Can you speak right now? Of course, it's business. The old man sighs. What do you want? I have a student I've been looking into recently. A young man from Class 1A. He gulps. I have his internship information here. I was wondering if you could evaluate him for me. Let me get this straight. Torino starts, and Tashinori can almost see the man counting on his fingers. You want me, an elderly man, to stalk a 15-year-old boy. Crash his internship. An important step in every young hero's journey. And essentially kick the hell out of him, just so you can evaluate if he's good enough for you to give one for all. Tashinori stutters, trying to find his words, but he hears the old man let out a chuckle from the other end of the phone. Sounds like fun. What's his name? Kirishima sneezes, brushing one of his fingers under his nose to clear any debris. He sniffs loudly, blinking rapidly as the wind assaults his face. To his side, he sees Mina looking at him, quizzically. You all right? She asks with mild concern. Yeah, Kirishima placates. Just something in my nose, I think. He sighs, leaning his head back. Fingers crossed it isn't a cold. That would be the worst timing. Mina nods, but doesn't respond further. The group follows their teachers in two lines walking towards the train station, getting several stares from bystanders. Some people even go as far as to take pictures of them or ask several for their autographs. Many young children even ran up to Mina as they walked, asking for pictures with the pink-skinned hero in training. Kirishima looked her up and down. He supposed he understood where they were coming from. Looking to the front of the lines, he saw Aizawa and Midnight talking in a hushed tone, piquing Kirishima's curiosity. They had been told that Midnight would be taking over as homeroom teacher of 1B for a while. But when his classmates had asked why, Aizawa shut them down with a simple, "There is a pending investigation." The stone-skinned boy could not speak to his classmates' thoughts. However, he knew the vague answer had got his mind buzzing with possibilities. He didn't want to make any assumptions, but the timing between Vlad's absence and the finale of the sports festival was suspicious to say the least. He really hoped that his worries weren't true. On the other hand, an absence that left no confusion in his mind was Bakugo. Kirishima had seen his blonde classmates sitting at his desk, seething as he watched the rest of his classmates pick up their costume cases and head out the door, following Aizawa. He also swore he saw an ectoplasm clone enter the room after they left, perhaps to keep an eye on Bakugo while Aizawa was gone. Kirishima shook his head, not wanting to spare that person another thought. The classes made their way onto the platform of the train station, students moving from neat lines to small groups, chatting animatedly with one another. Kirishima moved over to the route chart, mapping the train line he would need to take to get to his internship. He traced a finger across the brightly colored lines, checking his phone for directions. He nods, finding his stop, and moved back, crowding into a group around Aizawa and Midnight. "All right," Aizawa commands attention, every student turning and fixing their attention on him. "I should not have to tell you all this, but the minute you step onto those trains, you represent UA. Got it? Don't do anything stupid." Aizawa's blunt words of advice hit most of Class 1B like a wet fish, clearly seeming put off by the statement, while Aizawa's class just brushed it off. Midnight cut in, lightly elbowing Aizawa in the side, "But don't let that discourage all of you from enjoying yourselves and learning from your new teachers. Does everyone know where they are going?" There was a sea of nods, broken by a few students shaking their heads. Midnight called the students who were confused, helping them get to the right station, while the other students lined up on the platform at the proper gates. Kirishima saw Mina running over to him, lugging her briefcase with her. "Oh hey, we have the same train." Mina cheered, pumping her free hand into the air. Kirishima smiled at her enthusiasm, meeting her open hand in a high five, causing the girl to smile. The two stood side by side, taking in the somewhat chaotic surroundings of the platform. Kirishima sees several students triple-checking the gate number, making sure they have the right train. Far across the station, he sees Ida, who seemed to be staring off into space. The red-haired boy had tried several times to get Ida to open up to him, but every time their class president had shrugged him off. Before, Ida had at least attempted to give Kirishima platitudes, saying he was fine, or he didn't need help. But eventually, Ida had stopped doing even that, merely ignoring Kirishima. Kirishima hopes that once the internships are over, Ida will open up a bit. Continuing to look around the platform, he sees Yaoyorozu looking down at her feet, suitcase grasped in both hands, and he can't help the spike of pity he feels for the girl. Ever since her match with Midoriya, she had seemed very withdrawn. She didn't talk to any of her classmates. He wasn't defending the girl's beliefs, but there was something about seeing the once poised and proper girl looking so defeated. Maybe this is a good thing in the end, Kirishima thinks. Maybe that loss will serve as a wake-up call for her. "Hey, is this the H line?" Kirishima and Mina turn around, seeing Kaminari looking at the sign in confusion, and Shinso standing next to him, not meeting their eyes. Kirishima was unsure of what to think of their new classmate. The boy was quiet and seemed somewhat aloof, but he hadn't done anything to make Kirishima think ill of him. Plus, Kaminari seemed to vouch for him. When Shinso had entered their class, Kaminari had been quick to greet the tired-looking boy and welcome him into the class, and had been quick to invite Shinso to their lunch table during free periods. "Yeah," Kirishima confirms, causing Kaminari to breathe a sigh of relief. The two boys joined their classmates in line for the train. "Sorry," Kaminari apologized. "I was having issues understanding the train lines. Just looks like spaghetti to me." Kaminari gives his classmates a tired smile, Just glad I found the right one eventually. Kirishima nods to Kaminari before turning to face Shinso. He gives the boy a smile and holds out his hand for a shake. Hi, Kirishima chirps. I'm Kirishima. You're Shinso, right? Shinso stares at his hand in disbelief before flicking his eyes up to meet Kirishima's gaze. The violet-haired boy's posture is rigid, his body withdrawn. Kirishima feels a sense of nerves wash over him, but pushes on. Oh, don't let the teeth fool you, I don't bite. Kirishima jokes. This seems to ease Shinso's tension a bit, his shoulders slowly relaxing. Shinso reaches out and meets Kirishima's hand, completing the handshake. Kaminari slings an arm over Shinso's shoulders, and Shinso's reaction gives Kirishima the impression that he would rather be anywhere but there at that moment. Look at you, Kaminari beams, making friends already. Though that isn't terribly surprising, Kirishima is basically the golden retriever of Class 1A. Hey, Kirishima remarks, I am not. Mina moves closer to Kaminari, moving to his ear and stage whispering, Oh, poor boy is in denial, isn't he? Kaminari lets out a laugh, and Mina joins him, while Kirishima tries his best to mock anger at his friend's antics. Kirishima opened his mouth, ready to admonish the pair, but was interrupted by another voice muttering to themselves. Well, fingers crossed he's housebroken. We'll be on the same train. After all, Kirishima turns to see Shinso, who seemed shocked that he had said that. Kaminari and Mina had also turned to Shinso, whose face was growing red. The tired boy made to apologize or retract his statement, but was interrupted by a chorus of laughter from his classmates, Kirishima included. When the laughter died down, Kirishima gave the boy a thumbs up. Yeah, you're gonna fit in just fine. The ringing of the bell signals the end of a short school day for the support course. Power Loader addressed the students from his desk. All right, class. Power Loader's tone is exhausted, and his posture is more slouched than usual, and his mouth hangs slightly ajar. Today is a short day, due to internships, so be sure to check your train schedule to the proper time if applicable. Hikaru stands from his desk, packing his things and getting ready to head out for the day, but finds his gaze catching on his teacher, who stands with a groan and heads to the workshops in the back of the room, with Hatsum following close behind. Hikaru noted that Hatsum seemed equally as exhausted as Power Loader. Her hair was matted with grease and oil, her face had light burns and stains of oil. But, unlike Power Loader, she had that same animated smile on her face. He watches as she bounces on the balls of her feet, humming a noiseless tune as she follows Power Loader to the back of the classroom. Normally, he wouldn't pay too much attention to the actions of his eccentric classmate, but he had noticed that every day for the past few days, she and Maijima had been staying late after class. So his curiosity had been piqued. He waited for the two to round the corner of the workshop and slowly began to follow them. He saw them disappear into Hatsum's stall, and he waited for a minute. Eventually, he heard the sounds of machines whirring up and excited chatter between teacher and student. Slowly, Hikaru moved closer to the stall, the chaotic sounds of their talking slowly becoming more coherent as he grew closer and closer still. Eventually, he was aligned with the tarp defining the station walls and could hear the speech from within the partition. Hatsum, for the last time, the device does not need a laser. Power Loader seemed frustrated, but he could hear May's excited humming from within. You are correct, Hatsum admits. It does not need a laser. But it should have a high-powered arc beam powered by a potent diode. Hatsum, that the Sam-Power Loader stops, and Hikaru can hear the man's iron-tipped fingers scraping against each other. Look, we still haven't properly figured out integration. How about we focus on that first? Then we think about lasers. There is a silence, likely caused by Hatsum pondering the thought, but eventually she responds with a short, yes. What are they talking about? Hikaru thinks to himself, integration? Lasers? What exactly are they building in there? Now, Power Loader speaks, and papers shuffle from within the partition. I think we have a good design laid out. The idea of using several lenses within the mechanism to align sight was brilliant. Hatsum seemed to preen at his praise. However, this doesn't matter if we can't actually implant the device. I still believe that a direct connection would work best, Hatsum argued. It would allow for as perfect information delivery as possible. But Power Loader remarks, like I have said before, it is also the most risky option. May grunts in disagreement, but Power Loader continues. You are talking about connecting a processing cable to his optic nerve, Hatsum. Do you know what could go wrong with that procedure? There was a silence, and the pieces began to click in Hikaru's head. Hikaru ponders what they are saying, but why? Why are they doing this? He hears Power Loader sigh. I didn't mean to shout at you, but you understand my point, right? Again, a silence, but he can assume Hatsum nodded. Okay, so let's think about how else we can make this work. But I promise you, Hatsum, this will work? I don't understand. Hikaru thinks. Why do all of this for somebody who you barely know? He turns to face the ceiling, face twisted in confusion. Hatsum and Midoriya have barely spoken before, and Power Loader is just his teacher. It doesn't make sense. What happened to Midoriya was bad, but I'm sure that the heroes are working to make it right. They have to be. His thoughts stop, and he finds himself drawn inward to a memory from almost half a month ago. You sat to the side, pretending it wasn't happening until a hero came along and started to pressure the students. That's what it takes, huh? For a hero to get involved? The words had stung then. Hikaru remembers feeling them stab him in that moment, but now it was more like a dull ache, one that hurt less, but lasted far, far longer. He knows deep down why that is. Everybody sits there, watching atrocity after atrocity, only ever doing anything when a hero tells them to. It's because they were true. But what am I supposed to do? Hikaru ponders. Why should the responsibility of all the problems in the world fall onto me? Why is it my fault? Why do I feel so guilty? Did you speak with Midoriya today? Hatsum asks Power Loader. Power Loader sighs loudly. No, not yet. But I heard something from Recovery Girl. Some good news for him. It might help him feel better. Hatsum lets out a hum of acknowledgement. That is good. Does he know about this? No, Power Loader admits. Not yet. I want to leave it a surprise for him, for when he gets back. There is a long silence between the pair, the sounds of clinking metal and the shaving of glass serving as the only interruption. Hatsum pauses. Do you think this will help him feel better? He can't see it, but he can almost hear the smile on Power Loader's face. I know it will. I never had a hero. I never wanted a hero. All I wanted was for someone to do something. Hikaru remembers how people describe an epiphany. Waking up from a dream that has lasted your whole life. A curtain lifting, showing the world in a brand new palette of colors, far more vibrant than before. Yet, what he feels in the moment is nothing quite so romantic. There is no curtain, no saturation of life. It's more like a click as the last piece of the puzzle fits into place. Muted, subdued, but he recognizes it nonetheless. With a deep breath, Hikaru turns the corner, entering the booth. Power Loader and Hatsum stare at him in shock, and he immediately feels himself grow embarrassed, but he pushes through the feeling and speaks. I overheard what you were talking about. He pauses, trying to find the right words. I want to help. I'm not an expert in mechanics, but I know brain chemistry. He speaks a bit too loudly and curls a bit in on himself. Power Loader and Hatsum do not speak, so Hikaru continues. I think I know what is happening here, and I want to help. He nods roughly. I think I can help if you want me to. Power Loader and Hatsum look to one another, silently coming to a consensus before they turn back, and Power Loader gestures for him to continue. Hikaru nods. I agree with Hatsum about direct integration. He sees Power Loader move to stop him, but he keeps speaking. I know it's dangerous, but that's only if you can't match a negative feedback frequency for the input cable to the action potential in the brain. Power Loader freezes, and Hatsum leans in, a big smile on her face. If you can do that, then you end up with a positive potential going in, but negative potential leading out, meaning that there is no way for feedback to occur. Hatsum jumps to her feet, grabbing Hikaru by the shoulders and seating him in the stool. Hikaru lets out a grunt of disapproval, but she pushes a pencil into his hands. Keep going, Hatsum encourages. Hikaru looks up at his teacher, who still seems a bit shocked by his statement, but the man takes a deep breath and offers the boy a smile. Well, Power Loader claps his hands together, his iron fingertips clinking against one another. Let's hear what you've got. Recovery Girl enters the nurse's office, hanging up her phone on the way in. She doffs her jacket, hanging it on a nearby coat rack. With a breath, she walks around to the only occupied cot in the office, seeing Midoriya sitting up awake. "Oh," she remarks. "Sorry, dearie. Did I wake you?" Izuku shakes his head, eyes never meeting hers. "Well, I'll just do some monitoring." She moves over to the four hooked up to Izuku's arm. "Do you think you can eat now?" Izuku nods, and she presses a gauze to his wrist, slowly removing the needle from the injection site. She holds her hand on the gauze, gently pressing the gauze down on the boy's left wrist. She sees him looking down at his wrist, at the gauze as it slowly blooms with a crimson spot in the center, and Recovery Girl can't help but note how much the boy's eye had changed. In their first meeting, when she looked into his eyes, she saw an angry flame hidden within their green hues. He was hurt in more ways than one, but still determined, fueled by the fire hidden within the pools of his eyes. Now, with a thick bandage covering the right side of his face, it was hard for her to gauge how much that fire had died down. But within his still present eye, she couldn't help but note how dull they felt now. It made a chill run down her spine. But perhaps a recent call will cheer the boy up. "I have some good news for you," Recovery Girl chirped, trying to amplify her excitement in efforts to boost his own. "I just got off the phone with a colleague of mine, an independent doctor with a practice a short ways away." She tries to put another hand on the boy's shoulder, but he flinches, causing her to reel her hand away, focusing on putting pressure on the forewound. His quirk isn't healing necessarily, but it does work wonders for cosmetic surgery, such as removing birthmarks and scars. She sees Izuku turn slightly towards her, still not interacting meaningfully, but seemingly more interested. "UA is willing to fund for you to go through the procedure, to remove the scar from your face." Her smile turns strained. He can't fix everything, but he would be able to help you get rid of the scarring at the very least." Izuku finally looks at her straight, his one eye meeting hers, and she thinks she can see them brighten ever so slightly. "If you would like, I can drive you to his practice as soon as I clear you to leave." Immediately, she feels the boy flinch and lean away from her. She tries to soothe Midoriya, but before she can, she sees his mouth open. A cough, his voice haggard from disuse. "I can get there myself." She almost wants to smack him for his stubbornness, but calms herself down, trying to reason with him. "I understand that you don't feel comfortable around me just yet, but be reasonable." She shakes her head in frustration. "You're still hurt, physically and mentally. I do not feel comfortable letting you go on your own." She leans over, trying to put a comforting hand on his shoulder, but he reels back as if her hand was on fire. His eye has widened, and he seems afraid of her. Before she can reason with him, he hisses out, "Don't touch me," he commands, slowly trying to get up from his cot. Recovery Girl tries to stop him, but he uses his one arm to spin himself to the other side of the bed, legs swinging off the cot and hanging down towards the floor. Midoriya leans forward, letting his body slide off the cot and onto his feet, which immediately buckle under his weight, causing him to slip and nearly fall. Recovery Girl rushes to the other side of the cot to help the boy stand up, but he pushes his body up on his own, using his arm to prop his body up. He leans heavily on the cot, but finally puts his weight on his legs, standing somewhat upright. "I do not need your help," Midoriya states with finality. Recovery Girl wonders if he is talking to her, or to himself. "Just give me the address, and I can go myself." Recovery Girl shakes her head. "I am not about to let you do that." She moves closer. "Just let me take a look at you, and then we can go dash." She puts her hand on his side, and he brings his up, swatting it away. Recovery Girl steps back, less in pain and more in shock at the boy's face, which is twisted into a scowl. "I told you not to touch me." He whips his hand towards her for emphasis, but winces as the bruises on his ribs flare up. Recovery Girl breaks from her shock and tries to help him, but he takes a step back, putting a corner to his back, eyes darting around the room. The nurse takes a deep breath, trying to calm the boy down by putting her hands in the air and backing away. She sees Midoriya take a deep breath, but his eye stays locked on her. "Just tell me where he is, and I will go there." She doesn't respond, so Midoriya emphasizes, "Please." Recovery Girl eyes him for another moment, but sighs, walking over to the desk and writing it down in a notebook. Tearing the page from the book, she faces him again, putting the paper on a desk between them and backing away. Izuku slowly moves from the corner, never leaving her until he reaches the desk. He grabs the paper and takes a few steps back, hugging the wall as he approaches the door. Finally, he reaches the entrance of the nurse's office and turns to leave, but Recovery Girl calls out to him. "You know," she begins, "you can trust me. If I had wanted to hurt you, I would have, but I didn't." Izuku doesn't respond, so Recovery Girl presses, "It might be hard for you to believe, but there are people who want to help you here." Izuku hesitates for a moment, but opens the door. "You're right," he admits. "That is hard to believe." Stepping through the door, he lets it shut behind him, leaving Recovery Girl alone in the room. Taking a deep breath, he looks down at the paper, deciphering the flowery lines of her penmanship. Tatsuka Tower, host of... Izuku feels a stab in the back of his head, anxiety filling him, wondering if this is just another trick, a cruel joke. She could be lying to him. It wouldn't be the first time. It could all be fake, a lie. But he thinks if it is true... He holds a hand up to his bandaged face, tracing over the scarring that he knows is there, under the thick padded gauze. He steels himself, taking another deep breath, before slowly walking into the darkness of the school after hours, supporting himself on the railing on the sides of the lonely hall. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Genius Deku Challenged the World Without a Quirk. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to JayDeeKay for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.